Dragon Emperor Sun Chapter 181 to Chapter 190. Brother, I really didn't lie to you, Mr. Chen. But before Manager Zhang's words were finished, he was pushed away by the man. If he doesn't kneel down today, it's useless. Even if the King of Heaven is here, I won't give any face to me. After the man finished speaking, with one look, he would let his subordinates do it. Seeing this, Manager Zhang hurriedly gave the salesman a wink and asked her to take away Kui Ziwen and the others quickly. The fewer people you see, the better. If this is spread out or recorded just like, the reputation of their Pine Bay has plummeted. Seeing this, the salesperson hurriedly called Kui Ziwen and the others to leave. Kui Ziwen was a little reluctant. He wanted to see David being beaten with his own eyes. It's a pity that such a wonderful scene is not allowed to watch. Kui Ziwen said disappointedly. No, let this guy David pretend all day long. This time, he will be unlucky. Wang Lanlin also sneered. Only Sun Xiaomeng frowned slightly, and she was a little worried in her heart. If this really cost people's lives, it would be troublesome. Xiaomeng, aren't you still worried about David? Haven't you always hated him? Seeing Sun Xiaomeng like this, Wang Lanlin asked. Hate is hate, but you can't just watch him lose his life. Sun Xiaomeng looked sad, or let's call the police. Call the police, don't you see how vicious that man is? If you knew we called the police, maybe the whole family would be killed by him. Kui Ziwen threatened Sun Xiaomeng. Sure enough, after saying this, Sun Xiaomeng was so frightened that she didn't dare to report the matter to the police. At this time, at the entrance of Pine Bay, David's subordinates had all been brought down, and they were just a bunch of gangsters. It only took David 10 seconds to solve it. Seeing David's skills so well, that Easter's face changed slightly with fright, and the woman became even more panicked. Do you still need me to kneel down and apologize? David looked at the brother and asked with a cold smile. The muscles in the corners of the brother's eyes kept twitching, and finally he gritted his teeth and said, Boy, are you good at fighting? I tell you, I have written down your license plate number, I can find out what your name is, where you live. Where, if you can fight, I don't believe your family can fight. Brother Dong threatened David with his family, but he didn't know that this had touched David's inverse scale. Are you threatening me? David's eyes burst out with murderous aura, and the terrifying murderous aura directly shrouded that brother. Brother Dong couldn't help shaking, only to feel the cold wind digging into his neck. Boy, you don't have to look at me like this, don't you dare to kill me in front of everyone. Brother Dong also gritted his teeth, his face full of sternness, if you don't kill me today, I will kill your whole family when I get the chance. This guy actually started to play rascal with David, with an expression like a dead pig is not afraid of boiling water. You are courting death. David's murderous aura became stronger and stronger, and when Manager Zhang saw this, he hurriedly stopped in front of David. Mr. Chen, forget it, it's not a big deal. Manager Zhang, I don't want a murder in front of my community, and he can't afford to offend either of these two people, and I don't want anyone to have an accident. David did not speak, but lightly took out his mobile phone and called Lin Tianhu. 10 minutes to the entrance of Pine Community. After just saying one sentence, David hung up the phone. When Brother Dong saw that David could shake people, the corner of his mouth suddenly raised. I really can't see, you can shake people. I want to see who you called. Brother Dong said, and also made a phone call, obviously calling someone. Soon, several vans came quickly, followed by more people, all with sticks. When the brother saw that the person he had called had arrived, he immediately said proudly, Boy, where is the person you called? Wouldn't you dare to come? It's here, David said lightly. I saw not far away, a car was driving towards this side at a high speed, and the speed was extremely fast. The older brother saw that there was only one car coming, and immediately laughed, Are you fucking kidding me? Just call a car, how many people can it hold? Even if you can fight, I can keep going. Call someone, even if you are tired, you can be exhausted to death. I hope that after seeing people, you still keep the smile you are now. David sneered. Soon, the car came to the front, and then a burly man opened the door and walked down. When he saw the person clearly, the smile on that brother's face instantly solidified on his face. Everyone else also took a breath of air. It was Lin Tianhe who came, and he was the only one. After walking quickly to David, Lin Tianhe respectfully shouted, "Mr. Chen." Seeing that Lin Tianhe was being so polite to David, the eldest brother was dumbfounded on the spot, shaking all over. "Get rid of him." David looked at the brother and said. Lin Tianhe nodded and turned to face his shivering brother. Lin Tianhe's eyes swept around, and all the people called by the eldest brother turned pale with fright, and hurriedly threw away the weapons in their hands. "You still don't get out, are you staying to find death?" Lin Tianhe shouted loudly, scaring away all those people called by Donga. What a joke, the dignified underground emperor of Horindal, how dare these little BA5TARDS dare to provoke them? Tiger! Tiger Lord! The brother trembled and shouted at Lin Tianhe. Lin Tianhe stepped forward and slapped that brother in the face. Brother Dong didn't dare to move at all, while his wife gave up a little, and immediately yelled at Lin Tianhe, "Who are you? Why beat people?" The woman roared at Lin Tianhe, but he was so frightened that he almost fainted. Snapped! The eldest brother gave his wife a slap in the face. "The stinky bitches of Malagofi, who told you to speak, do you have a share in speaking here?" Brother Dong had already cursed his wife to death at this time. If she hadn't provoked David and called him, how could he have disturbed Lin Tianhe? And looking at Lin Tianhe's respectful attitude towards David, it is obvious that David's identity is not ordinary. But he just couldn't figure it out. How could such a person with status drive a broken Chang'an? The woman was beaten by her husband with a blue nose and a swollen face, and the whole person will be disfigured. But Brother Dong knew in his heart that if he didn't act ruthlessly, I'm afraid both of them would die. "Master Hu, the woman is open-minded, I hope Master Hu won't be angry." East brother desperately followed Lin Tianhe to apologize. But Lin Tianhe didn't appreciate it at all. He pulled Dong Ji's collar and punched him in the lower abdomen, and Dong Ji fell to his knees in pain. David slowly walked in front of the buddy and looked down at the buddy. "Didn't you just ask me to kneel down and apologize? Why are you kneeling now?" David asked with a little playfulness. The brother didn't dare to look up, and kowtowed desperately, "I beg Mr. Chen to raise your hand, I'm not human, I'm blind." Brother desperately begging for mercy. "I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately you threatened my family." After David finished speaking, he didn't pay attention to the brother, but got into the car and drove the Maserati away, and drove into the community. With David's words, Lin Tianhe knew what to do, and no matter how the brother begged for mercy, he was still taken into the car by Lin Tianhe, and all that awaited him was death. And the woman was dumbfounded when she saw her husband being taken away and the Maserati who was hit beyond recognition. After a while, Manager Zhang followed many security guards to react, and Manager Zhang said to the security guards, "When I see Mr. Chen in the future, they will be respectful to me. Whoever dares to be disrespectful to Mr. Chen will get the H3LL out of here right away." At this time, David was driving up the mountain. He had just walked for a while, but he encountered Kui Ziwen and the others again. Several people had already seen the house and were being led away by the sales lady. Seeing David coming in with the battered Chang'an in front of him, everyone was stunned. They couldn't understand how David got in. This David must have rushed in while no one was paying attention. It is estimated that he was afraid of being beaten. Wang Lanlin looked at David's smashed front and said, "This guy is so daring, he even dares to enter Pine Bay." Kui Ziwen sneered. Hearing the conversation between the two, the sales lady seemed to have thought of something, so she rushed over and stopped David. If David really broke in and stopped him now, the company will definitely reward him at that time. The sales lady's idea is very naive. Because she does not belong to the property, she does not know about David's residence in Pine Bay. You are so brave, you dare to drive in. After the sales lady stopped David, she asked loudly. David was slightly taken aback. I drove in directly, I didn't break in, your manager saw it. David, stop quibbling. Look at what happened to your car. You must be afraid of being beaten and drove in. I guess someone is chasing you behind. Wang Lanlin also walked over with a sneer. David, only the owners here can enter the community. We bought a house, but we were brought in. You didn't buy a house, and you're not the owner, so you rushed in directly. Isn't this a break-in? Kui Ziwen asked with the corner of his mouth raised. Who told you that I'm not the owner anymore? David said lightly. Hearing David's words, everyone was stunned. The sales lady hurriedly asked, You bought a house here? Why don't I have an impression? The sales lady looked at David and felt that David didn't look like someone who could buy a house here, and the people who bought the house here were either rich or expensive. Many sales girls knew each other and even had contact information. David, can you stop bragging? Do you know how much the houses here cost? Let's just say these bungalows at the foot of the mountain, even if they are the smallest units, you can't afford them in your whole life. How dare you say that you are the owner here? Kui Ziwen said with a look of contempt, I have been a manager for so many years, and after adding bonus commissions, I can buy the cheapest house here, and I only need to pay a down payment. You are a guy who just made it, where can you buy a house? I think you can't even afford to buy a house in the suburbs, you're only fit to live in an old and dilapidated community. Kui Ziwen's face was full of disdain, he didn't believe David would buy a house here. Not only Kui Ziwen didn't believe it, Wang Lanlin and Sun Xiaomeng didn't believe it. If David had the ability to buy a house here, how could Sun Xiaomeng find him a job? Sir, since you said that you are the owner here, then point out that the house is yours? You don't have to think about deceiving me, because I know who the owners of the houses here are. The sales lady asked David. Yes, you have the ability to point it out, which one is yours? How about we go to your house and sit down? Wang Lanlin asked with a half-smile but not a smile. David pointed at the top of the mountain, the set on the top of the mountain is mine. The one on the top of the mountain. Kui Ziwen was stunned for a moment, and then burst out laughing, David, you're fucking kidding me, do you know how much a villa on the top of the mountain is worth? You can't afford to sell your whole family. You brag a bit too big, it's unrealistic. David, can you live a little more realistically? Today, you are trying to break into Pine Bay. I'm afraid it will be the first time in your life that you will enter this community, and I'm afraid it will be the last time. You dare to say that the hilltop villa is yours. I think you haven't even been to the top of the mountain, have you? Wang Lanlin laughed too. Sun Xiaomeng gave David a blank look. In her eyes, David was just a douchebag who couldn't get up, and he couldn't stick to the wall. This gentleman, do you know the value of the villa on the top of the mountain? You dare to talk about it here. The sales lady also laughed. Why do you say that I am open-mouthed? David asked coldly. I sold that villa. The owner of the villa's surname is Su, but he doesn't seem to be surnamed Chen. How do you say it's yours? The sales lady looked at David sneeringly, as if waiting for David to explain. Can't that be given to me by someone else? David said with a smile. Give it to you. The sales lady covered her mouth and smiled. Yes, yes, you can say that the entire Pine Bay was given to you by others, it's not illegal, but you broke into Pine Bay without permission, according to our community. The rules are to drive you out. Just after the sales lady finished speaking, a guy wearing a security uniform and holding a baton came over. Xiaolan, why are you free to come around the community today? When the security guard saw the sales lady, he immediately said with a flattering smile. It turned out to be Captain Wang. Someone broke into the community and just kicked him out. After the sales lady saw the security guard, she immediately kept David. The security guard glanced at David, then looked at the Chang'an car that had already hit the potholes beside David, and suddenly said angrily, "Damn, there are people who dare to break into the community I am in charge of, don't you want to live? I am the security captain here, don't ask about it." "Brother security guard, this David just hit a luxury car at the door, and people are going to beat him. It is estimated that he was afraid of being beaten and drove in directly. If you catch him, it will be a great achievement," Kui Ziwen said to the security captain. Yes, we all saw it just now, he hit a Maserati." Wang Lanlin also nodded again and again. Sun Xiaomeng didn't speak, but her face was not very good looking. She didn't want to care about David. This guy's bragging personality made her very disgusted. "Good boy, if you hit a car and dare to break in, you are out of luck when you meet me today," the security captain said, and grabbed David. But when he reached out his hand, David grabbed his wrist, twisted it lightly, and directly controlled the security captain. The severe pain instantly made the security captain scream. "Boy, it hurts to death, let me go, do you know who I am? The property manager here is my brother-in-law, if you dare to touch me, I promise you won't get out of here," the security captain roared. "You didn't know anything about it, so you shot at me directly. How did you become the security captain?" "I said, I am the owner here. Is this how you serve the owner?" David questioned the security captain. You let go, I'll just ask." The captain of the security saw David meeting twice, and he was not an opponent, so he could only let David let go of himself first. Seeing this, David released the security captain, and the security captain rubbed his wrist, looked at David viciously, and then took out the walkie-talkie. All the security guards came to gather in Area A, and someone broke into the community and attacked me. The security captain directly used the walkie-talkie to start calling people. He was just trying to slow down the army and let David let go of himself. As for whether David is the owner's business, he won't ask. It can be seen with his eyes that David can't be the owner. "Boy, my people will be here soon, you just wait to be beaten." The security captain looked at David coldly and said. At this time, Manager Zhang, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, suddenly heard his brother-in-law shouting on the walkie-talkie, and also said that someone broke into the community and beat him, and Manager Zhang's heart suddenly lifted. He wasn't worried about his brother-in-law, but he was afraid that his brother-in-law who didn't have enough food and what he could do would get into trouble. His brother-in-law was so lazy to do it. Finally, after begging him for a long time, he agreed to let him come here as a security guard. Team leader. I have just been here for 2 days, and I don't want to do anything. I mess with flowers everywhere. The little girls in the sales office are all familiar. When Manager Zhang ran to Area A with many security guards, David's car was parked there from a distance, and David was standing beside the car, and the cold sweat on Manager Zhang's forehead instantly flowed down. I'm afraid of what's coming, this time my brother-in-law is a big disaster. Manager Zhang hurriedly ran over, and the security captain saw his brother-in-law brought someone in person, and immediately greeted him and said, "Brother-in-law, this guy broke into the community, and he just attacked me, he must teach him a good lesson." And Kui Ziwen saw the property manager with the security chasing after him, and immediately said with a sneer, "David, I see where you are going, although it's not illegal to brag, but if you brag too much, you have to pay. For the price, you still dare to say that you are the owner here and still live in the house on the top floor, why don't you say that you live in the sky? I've lived for more than 20 years, and this is the first time I've seen such a shameless brag." Wang Lanlin covered her mouth and smiled. The eyes of the two were full of playfulness, ready to wait for a good show. However, Sun Xiaomeng sighed, thinking that if David is really going to be beaten, he will talk to himself and see if it works, but he can't just watch David be beaten. But while Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin were waiting for the property manager to bring someone over to teach David a good lesson, they saw that the manager slapped his brother-in-law fiercely. This slap was very powerful. Almost knocked the security captain to the ground. This time, the security captain was stunned and looked at his brother-in-law with an unbelievable face. "Brother-in-law, why are you hitting me? Did you take the wrong medicine?" the security captain asked dissatisfied. "Yes, I took the wrong medicine. I shouldn't have let you come to work." "What kind of security captain? You've been fired now, get out of here, get away as far as you want, and never come again." Manager Zhang snatched the baton from his brother-in-law's hand and said. "You," the security captain glared at Manager Zhang, "okay, if you dare to treat me like this, I'll tell my sister to go." The security captain said and left immediately. Manager Zhang's operation made Kui Ziwen and the others bewildered. Even the sales lady didn't know what was going on. Only the security guards who brought him knew that Manager Zhang was saving his brother-in-law. If the security captain continued to stay at the scene, David would be unhappy and directly kill him. After the security captain left, Manager Zhang looked at David with a cold sweat on his head. He was afraid that David would speak, and he would not let his brother-in-law leave. However, seeing that David did not say anything, Manager Zhang was relieved. After walking quickly to David, Manager Zhang said humbly, "Mr. Chen, I'm really sorry, my brother-in-law just came here, and I don't know anything. Your lord has a lot of..." Seeing that the property manager followed David to apologize in such a low-key manner, Kui Ziwen and the others were dumbfounded. "I said, did you make a mistake? He broke into your community without authorization, and even hit the car and beat up your brother-in-law. Are you still so lowly? Do you have such a good service attitude in your property?" Kui Ziwen looked at the property manager and asked. "That's right, just now we were going to come in to see a house and buy a house. Your security guards stopped us from entering, but you were so polite to an intruder. I really doubt the ability of your property. Isn't it a prisoner of labor reform? As for you? Is it so low-key? He really treats him as the owner of your community." Wang Lanlin said with a sneer. "If he could buy a house here, he wouldn't have to drive a broken Chang'an." He also said that the house on the top of the mountain belongs to him. "He's just bragging. I know him too well. We work in a company, and I'm his immediate boss. This guy can't do anything but brag." Kui Ziwen continued to say to the manager. The manager Zhang looked at Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin, and then at David. He didn't know what their relationship was, but Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin mocked David so much, so these people definitely couldn't be friends. Seeing that David had not spoken, Manager Zhang couldn't stand it any longer, and said to Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin, "Mr. Chen is indeed the owner of our place, and the villa on the top of the mountain is indeed his." As soon as Manager Zhang finished speaking, Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin were stunned, and Sun Xiaomeng was also stunned. "Manager Zhang, the owner of the hilltop villa is Su, I did the formalities myself." The sales lady asked Manager Zhang questioningly. "Did you make a mistake? The mountaintop villa will cost over 100 million at least to start. You say that a person who breaks through Chang'an and becomes a salesman can be the owner of the mountaintop villa? I don't believe it if I kill him. You are too unqualified as a property manager. Don't you know who owns the house you manage? You don't even look at David. Does he look like he owns a villa?" Kui Ziwen followed Wang Lanlin and questioned Manager Zhang. Looking at the questions from several people, Manager Zhang sneered, "It seems that you know more than me, the property manager. Let me tell you, the owner of the hilltop villa was indeed surnamed Su, but now it is Mr. Chen's. If there is nothing else, you can leave now, and you are not allowed to enter the community in the future." Manager Zhang's words made Kui Ziwen and the others all bewildered. No one would believe that David owned a villa worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "Manager Zhang, can I go now?" David didn't want to waste time with Kui Ziwen and the others, he was going to hurry up and practice. Of course, I'm really sorry for delaying Mr. Chen's time. Manager Zhang immediately changed into a humble look and opened the car door for David in person. David drove Chang'an, which had been hit beyond recognition, and drove directly to the top of the mountain. When it was time to pass Kui Ziwen and the others, David rolled down the car window and deliberately sneered at Kui Ziwen. I don't believe it, I absolutely don't believe it, he can't have a villa, I have to follow up to see, he must be bragging. Kui Ziwen roared like crazy. And Sun Xiaomeng watched David's car go farther and farther, and felt a burning hot feeling on her face. Things have come to this point, then David will definitely not be bragging, because she doesn't believe that David can buy such a big property manager to accompany her. He is bragging. Thinking that the villa was worth hundreds of millions, but at first he disliked his family's poverty. Even if he was looking for a job for David, he was forced by his father. Thinking of this, Sun Xiaomen's face became even hotter. That Wang Lanlan stared at the back of David's car with wide eyes, until the tail lights disappeared. Wang Lanlan's eyes were still looking at the road to the top of the mountain without even blinking. The huge shock made Wang Lanlan stunned. Kick them all out, and don't allow them to enter the community in the future, the property manager ordered loudly. More than a dozen security guards quickly kicked Kui Ziwen and the others out. Because of the stimulation, Kui Ziwen desperately wanted to go to the top of the mountain to confirm whether David was bragging. Just honestly left. After David drove to the villa, he opened the door and found that it was still clean and spotless. Sonia should have sent someone to clean it. Sonia always hoped that she could talk to her parents, and then let her parents come back, but Chen, I would like to wait a few days to talk about it, after all, my parents are happily worrying about him and Wang Hanin. David sat on the sofa, took out Rolling Z and put it on the coffee table. Feeling the strong spiritual energy emanating from Rolling Z, David was very excited. This meat Ganoderma has become aconite, which is rare in 1,000 years. I hope that after absorbing this meat Ganoderma my realm can be improved. David now has an excellent cultivation method. If he wants to increase his strength, the only thing he lacks is aura. But now there is a lack of aura on the earth. Only on such a mountain top can the aura be filled. To increase strength, other methods are needed. After thinking about it for a while, David calmed down, and the concentration art began to slowly run. David's whole body was soon shrouded in a faint mist. As if feeling something, the Ganoderma in the glass bottle twisted wildly, as if trying to break through the glass bottle and escape. But no matter how the Ganoderma twisted, it was of no use at all. Soon, Ganoderma slowly stopped moving, and in a place similar to an eye, gas mixed with pale pink rushed out, and soon floating towards David. David opened his mouth slowly and sucked in a little force. The pale pink gas suddenly accelerated and was directly sucked into the body by David, and the fleshy Ganoderma shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was originally pink and fair. The appearance like a girl's skin is beginning to become wrinkled and dry at this moment. Soon, Ganoderma turned into a mass of powder. In the end, all the powder was sucked into David's body. David sat on the sofa like that, his eyes slightly closed. Time passed, I don't know how long it took, until it was almost dark. David slowly opened his eyes. David, who was full of joy, hurriedly inspected his danshan. At this time, except for the spiritual power in his danshan, David's realm did not improve. Hey! David sighed heavily, and finally got up and left the villa. David drove the damaged Chang'an car away from Pine Bay and found a repair shop to put the car there. David took a taxi and was ready to go home. But when David was waiting for the car on the side of the road, a red BMW stopped in front of him, the window was open, and Sun Xiaomeng stuck his head out. David, where are you going? I'll take you off. David was stunned for a moment. Sun Xiaomen's sudden attitude towards him made David a little not used to it. I go home. David said lightly. Come up, I happen to be on the way, and I'll send you a paragraph. Sun Xiaomeng opened the door in the car. Moreover, Sun Xiaomeng opened the co-pilot. You must know that she would never let David sit in her car before, and even if she did, she could only be in the back row. David didn't know what the H3LL this Sun Xiaomeng was doing, and suddenly it seemed like a different person. Come up, Sun Xiaomeng urged David to see that David was still not moving. David nodded and sat in the co-pilot. With one step on the accelerator, Sun Xiaomen's car headed towards David's house. David sat in the car without speaking, and the atmosphere in the car was a little awkward. David, do you really have a villa on the top of Pine Bay? After a while, Sun Xiaomeng broke the peace. Yet. David just nodded slightly. You bought it yourself. Sun Xiaomeng looked at David in surprise. It was given by someone else. David said lightly. Seeing that David didn't seem to like talking to herself, Sun Xiaomeng closed her mouth. After a while, David broke the calm and said, at this time, what are you driving for if you don't go home for dinner? Xiwen has set up a restaurant to eat together, and discuss marriage by the way. Sun Xiaomeng said. You guys are getting married. David was slightly taken aback. Well, we've been talking for a long time anyway, and the parents are pressing hard, so let's get married. Sun Xiaomeng said. David was silent for a while, and then said, I advise you to think carefully, that Kui Xiwen is not suitable for you. David said this, not because Kui Xiwen often ridiculed him and David retaliated, but David asked Lin Tianhu to investigate Kui Xiwen secretly. This guy is a big radish, and he was in love with Sun Xiaomeng. I don't know how many women are mixed with it. Although Sun Xiaomeng is also a bit snobby, but after all, she is the daughter of her father's old comrade in arms. David doesn't want Sun Xiaomeng to jump into the fire pit. Sun Xiaomeng was not too surprised after hearing David's words, but explained with a faint smile, actually, Xiwen is not as bad as you think, he may be mean to you, but I will persuade him in the future of. Sun Xiaomeng misunderstood David. She thought that the reason why David said this was because Kui Xiwen often targeted David, and David hated Kui Xiwen in his heart, so he persuaded her like this. When David heard this, he could only smile slightly, not explaining anything. Soon, when the car was passing through a relatively dark road, a car suddenly blocked in front of David's car. Sun Xiaomeng was startled, and hurriedly stepped on the brakes, then stopped the car and almost hit it. How did you drive? You're blind. Sun Xiaomeng rolled down the car window, stuck her head out and yelled loudly. But just after she scolded her, she shrank her head back in fright, because she saw that there was a Porsche 911 standing in front of her. She didn't dare to offend anyone who could drive such a car. She really scolded him. In a hurry, I am afraid that I will not be able to eat and leave. At this time, two people got off the Porsche car, a man and a woman. These two people were Jordan and Delia. After getting out of the car, the two looked at David with a sneer, and did not intend to leave. Sun Xiaomeng felt terrified when she saw it. She opened the door and got out of the car, and hurriedly apologized, Brother, I didn't mean it just now, please give up the car, or you should go first. Sun Xiaomeng said to Jordan lowly. Jordan glanced at Sun Xiaomeng, and found that Sun Xiaomeng was wearing a light pink dress and a ponytail, and she was a pretty young girl, so he took a second look, which made Delia beside her jealous. If you don't get out, we're here to find David. If you don't want to die, just get out of here. Delia yelled at Sun Xiaomeng. As Delia's voice fell, there were several vans behind the Porsche. At this time, dozens of people came down, all with machetes and looking bad. Sun Xiaomeng was so frightened that her face became extremely pale, and she didn't know what to do for a while. Xiaomeng, you can drive away first. David walked down from the co-pilot and said to Sun Xiaomeng, who was already scared and stupid. Sun Xiaomeng looked at David and wanted to say something, but when she saw the dozens of big men with machetes, she got in the car and left in a hurry. David, you really have a hard time picking up girls. You were just dumped by that Sonia, and immediately found a rich little woman. Seeing that this woman is young, drives a BMW, and has a good family condition? Tell me who's from it? Girl. Jordan looked at David with a sneer and asked. What? You want to change your taste too? David raised his mouth, but you really should change. You always eat leftovers, which doesn't match your identity as the eldest young master of the Xiao family. David's words made Jordan's face instantly turn hideous. In fact, Jordan has been brooding all the time. Although Delia tried his best to explain that when she was in love with David, she did nothing and was never slept by David at all, but Jordan still had a knot in her heart. If he hadn't really liked this Delia, he would have reached the point of talking about marriage. Jordan would have wanted Delia long ago. David, you're fucking pissing and taking care of yourself. What kind of virtue are you? How could I sleep with you? Don't be a toad and want to eat swan meat. I'm fucking disgusted when I see you. Delia yelled at David angrily. David's words were obviously trying to provoke her relationship with Jordan. David, you don't have to stir up troubles here and talk so fast. I believe that Delia will not sleep with you. Besides, I think you are virtuous. I'm afraid you don't even have the ability to be a man. Otherwise, Sonia will you dumped? If you were very good in bed and devoured Sonia to the death, you wouldn't be at this level now. Jordan gritted his teeth, although he said he didn't care, but he had a grudge in his heart. I don't know which of us has the ability to be a man? Haven't you discovered it yourself during this time? David smiled coldly. On the day he was released from prison, David crippled Jordan's ability, so now Jordan is no longer a complete man. After David finished speaking, Jordan's face instantly turned red and white. During this period of time, he was recovering from his injury. Logically speaking, his arm was only broken, which did not affect his other aspects. However, Jordan wanted to make out with Delia several times, but every time he took off his clothes, Jordan didn't respond at all. Originally Jordan thought that his injury would affect his other abilities, but when David said this, Jordan's heart trembled. Brother Lei, don't listen to David's nonsense. I know best whether you have the ability or not. You are the best. Stop talking nonsense with him, just kill him and throw him into the river. Delia persuaded Jordan. Jordan nodded, and then said to David, David, today is your death day next year, you offended me, I want you to know what happened. After he finished speaking, Jordan waved his hand, give it to me, directly hack him to death, and then throw him into the river. Jordan gave an order, and dozens of people charged towards David with machetes. People from the Along gang. David looked at the dozens of people who rushed up, and asked with a sneer. Seeing David at this time, Jordan was still in the mood to laugh, and he couldn't help but get even more angry. David, even if you find it, it's useless, because you're going to die soon. These people are indeed from the Along gang, and they are all one by one. But it's all killing without blinking an eye. Do you think you still have a chance to survive today? Jordan's face was gloomy, with a vicious look in his eyes. I think I should still be alive today. David raised the corner of his mouth, then looked at the dozens of Along gang members and said, didn't Liao Fixiang inform you that you can't provoke me? David's words directly caused the dozens of members of the Along gang to stop in place, looking at David up and down. Boy, who are you? How do you know Brother Xiang's name? At this time, a middle-aged man in a long gown asked David. Obviously this middle-aged man is the head of the Along gang. Who am I? You don't have the right to know. Before you start, you'd better call Liao Fixiang. David said lightly. David, what are you pretending to be? Brother Xiang, you can see him if you want. Jordan took a step forward, don't be afraid of him, I understand this kid, he has no identity, he was just released from prison. It's just prisoners of labor reform. Brothers are hacking him to death now, whoever hacks him first, I will give 200,000, and the other hand will give 10,000. Jordan knows that people will lose their minds and work desperately as long as they have enough benefits. When these people heard that the one who hacked to death first could get an extra 200,000, they rushed towards David like crazy, all thinking of hacking the first knife. Although Jordan gave the Along gang a lot of money, it was extremely limited if it was really divided into their hands. David watched these people take the initiative to seek death, and suddenly sneered, then raised his hand and grabbed a machete. He didn't see how David did it at all. Directly jumped into 2 paragraphs. The members of the Red Dragon gang who rushed in first were dumbfounded, looking at the machete with only half left in his hand, his eyes were full of horror. The others were also stunned. They didn't expect that David could pick up the machete with his bare hands, and even jumped the machete into 2 pieces, but David's hand was not injured at all. How is that possible? Jordan's eyes widened when he saw this scene, full of disbelief. Just when everyone was stunned, David took a kick and directly kicked the member of the Red Dragon gang who was rushing in the first place. It flew out more than 10 meters, and then fell heavily in front of Jordan. The member of the Along gang vomited blood, and he didn't know if he could survive. Seeing the bloody scene in front of her, Jordan's face became very ugly, and Delia was so frightened that she hid behind Jordan. "Don't be stunned, let's go together, even if he can grab a white blade with his bare hands, so many people can chop him into meat sauce." Jordan roared loudly. The members of the Along gang reacted, raised their machetes, and rushed towards David again. David's figure flashed, and I saw an afterimage constantly wandering in the crowd. These were all members of the Along gang, and David didn't need to be merciful. In just 1 minute, these dozens of Along gang members. All the members fell at David's feet. The mourning sounded endlessly, one by one was covered in blood, either arms or legs were broken, and the whole person became a crippled person. David did not kill, but saved the lives of these Along gang people. Seeing the tragic situation in front of him, Jordan trembled, and Delia was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she didn't dare to look into David's eyes. "Just because of these people, you want to take revenge and kill me? Are you underestimating me too much?" David slowly walked towards Jordan.